just before the credit crunch made such agreements all but impossible, but banks that were struggling with their own liquidity problems were reluctant to loan a huge amount of cash needed. Citigroup was due to provide 11 billion Canadian dollars of funding, with Royal Bank of Scotland, Deutsche Bank and Toronto Dominion Bank funding the rest. No termination fee will be paid by either side. And now we'll go to a commercial break and a word from our sponsors. The US House of Representatives has approved a $14 billion bailout for the US car industry. The vote came after the White House and leading Democrats reached broad agreement on the rescue package. The bailout could be delayed as it faces stiff opposition from Republicans in the Senate, where the Democrats have a razor-thin majority. General Motors and Chrysler say they run a risk of ruin without immediate aid. Ford says it needs the funds in the future. The legislation would provide loans to car makers to keep them in business over the coming months. It would also see the appointment of a car czar, named by President George W. Bush, to oversee the money and with the power to force the automakers into bankruptcy if they did not restructure their businesses to become viable. The government is also expected to take non-voting shares in General Motors, Ford and Chrysler. The big three automakers have until the 31st of March to submit plans to the car czar detailing how they intend to restructure and ensure their long-term survival, the Associated Press news agency have said. The three firms had called for the $34 billion rescue package between them when their bosses recently went before Congress to put their case. In South Korea, the South Korea's central bank has cut its interest rate by a record 1 percentage point to 3%, twice the expected reduction. It is the fourth reduction since October, when the rate stood at 5.25%. South Korea is vulnerable to the global downturn because of its high levels of foreign debt, weak currency, and doubts about the health of its banking sector. We are on the verge of an emergency situation that may need more drastic policy, the bank said. There is now judged to be a strong likelihood that growth will fall sharply as a result of worldwide economic slowdown, along with the financial market unrest, including the credit crunch, the Bank of Korea's rate setters added. And over in Europe, Germany's finance minister has strongly criticized Gordon Brown, the UK Premier, and his plans for reviving the UK economy, describing them as breathtaking and crass, and those are direct quotes. But sources close to the British government hit back, saying Berlin was out of step, another quote, with most nations on how to handle the crisis. Piers Steinbrück has criticised the UK's decision to cut VAT and raise national debt to record levels. His attack came as EU leaders gathered for an economic summit in Brussels. The two-day meeting has been billed as one of the most important summits for years, so we'll continue to keep an eye on this and report any updates to you. Again in the UK, bargain hunters are flocking to branches of Woolworths as the store closure sale starts at all of its 815 outlets across the country. People not familiar with Woolworths, well, I guess in the US, Target or Walmart would be a comparable company. In what looks like to be the beginning of the end of the retailer, its administrator Deloitte has said that some shops could close for good by the end of the year. Deloitte is also due to consult with Woolworths' 30,000 staff over the possibility of redundancies. Talks over the sale of leaseholds of individual stores are continuing. It is thought that Sainsbury's, Asda, Tesco, the Co-op and discount chain Poundland are still interested in picking up some of the retailer's prime sites. Explaining the store closure sale, Deloitte said, "Christmas is clearly the busiest time of year for retailers, and it is prudent to do all we can to sell existing stock." In the US, a prominent team of US-based researchers yesterday predicted 14 tropical storms in the 2009 Atlantic hurricane season, and said 7 would develop into hurricanes. The Colorado State University team, formed by forecasting pioneer William Gray, said 2009 would be somewhat above average hurricane season. This is something that the insurers and reinsurers should probably take heed of. The long-term average during the 6-month season, which begins the 1st of June, is for 10 or 11 tropical storms with 6 hurricanes. Mr. Gray's team, now led by his protégé, Philip Klotzbach, predicted that 3 of the next year's hurricanes would be dangerous storms, with a rank of Category 3 or above on the 5-step Saffir-Simpson scale of hurricane intensity. That would mean that the powerful sustained winds of at least 111 miles an hour. The Colorado State University experts, whose forecasts are followed closely in energy and commodity markets and by disaster relief professionals, had originally predicted 13 storms in the 2008 season and said 7 would strengthen into hurricanes. The season, which ended November the 30th, produced 16 tropical storms, 8 of which became hurricanes. And also in insurance news, the continued riots in Greece have cost the slowing economy hundreds of millions of euros in lost business, damages and insurance payouts. 5 days of violence has battered hundreds of shops, hurt consumer sentiment and cast a shadow over tourism, which represents nearly 1/5 of Greek gross domestic product. A long-planned general strike on Wednesday compounded the misery. The cost of damage in Athens alone is an estimated 200 million euros. For those of us in the US, that's about 254.7 million US dollars, said Valakis Korkidis, Vice Chairman of the National Confederation of Commerce, which says 565 shops have been hit in the capital. Shop owner and consumer sentiment has reached rock bottom, the Greek government said on Wednesday, and they have pledged financial compensation for shopkeepers affected by the turmoil, along with tax breaks and loan assistance. The riots will have negative impact